Hello everyone. Now let's talk about the demand planning process. Now before we talk about what exactly demand planning, how it is done, so let's understand the definition of demand planning. So demand planning is the process of forecasting the demand for a product or a service so that it can be produced and delivered more efficiently and on time to the customer. The goal of demand planning process is to strike a balance between having sufficient inventory levels to meet customer needs without having surplus or excess inventory. The planning side of supply chain typically starts with this process, that means demand planning, and which involves creating a demand plan for future. Now, typically, demand planning and forecasting covers upcoming 12 months or even up to 18 to 24 months in future. But this forecast period or this forecast horizon can vary by nature of product and even by type of the industry. Demand planning is fairly complex process. It's a very complex in nature because of multiple influencing factors on demand planning process like seasonality of product, inventory availability, promotional activities and price changes, consumers behavior, change in technology and even competitors action in the market. Demand planning process typically involves multiple elements like first, demand planner uses past or historical sales data to create a statistical forecast. Then demand planners works with the customers, product managers to override the statistical forecast by considering their inputs if they anticipate greater or lower demand and by how much. And then demand planner finalize consensus forecast, which is also called as unconstrained consensus demand forecast, because at this level there is no constraint in the demand plan so far. Now, why to do demand planning? So let's take an example. So example here is packet of bread which has lead time of 3 days, which is basically procurement of raw material, then manufacturing or making of bread, and then distribution of bread to a nearby retail stores. Now assume that you have gone to a grocery shop asking for a packet of bread, and shopkeeper said that he took your order and he asked you to collect the bread after 3 days, which is basically lead time of the bread. Now you go to another shop, another grocery shop, where you get packet of bread readily available in the shop. So here your experience with shop 2 or second shop will be much better in terms of delivery and responsiveness. And that is the key reason why demand planning is done. So in this case, shopkeeper 2 has done some demand planning for material that is required or some demand planning for the groceries which will be required for the customers. Now, as far as this example is concerned, we have considered bread packet. Similarly, there are thousands of standard products in the market, and each product has a different lead time to come to a retail shop from their entire processing. But you cannot necessarily wait for each product for their entire lead time. For an example, let's consider packet of milk, packet of salt, television, motorbike, a water bottle, a notebook, or even a pen. You cannot wait for 3 days or 6 days or even a week for these products to get their possession. So the existence of these products in a retail store is a result of demand planning that shopkeeper. Now let's take a very simple example of demand planning in a family. Now assume that it's a family of 4, including husband, wife, and 2 kids. Now on an average, this family needs certain groceries. Let's assume that there are 5 groceries that we are considering here. So this family needs 20 kg of rice in a month. They need 30 kg of wheat in a month. They need 15 kg of sugar in a month, and they need 60 eggs in a month, and they also need 2 salt packets in a month. Now let's assume that in the next month this family will have 2 more guests visiting for entire month. Now in this situation this family will also need more groceries for the next month, and accordingly these family members will keep more stock of the required items at right time. Let's assume that this family has planned to buy an extra grocery like 30 kg of rice, 45 kg of wheat, 22 kg of sugar, 90 eggs, and 3 salt packets for the next month. Now this is simply assumption of considering 2 more extra guests in next month. Now this is example which is talking about simplest form of demand planning, where family members are predicting demand for groceries for the next month. Now let's understand complexity of demand planning process, considering above example or considering this example by comparing above example with typical scenario in manufacturing or retail company. So there are multiple differentiating factors we have considered here. So first is time horizon to forecast. So in our above example, the time horizon is only next month. So we have done demand forecasting for only next month. But in a companies like retail or manufacturing companies, typically demand planners will have to do demand planning for next 12 or even 18 or even 24 months in the future. So it is more complex considering above example. The second factor is how many number of guests who will visit or simply number of customers from industrial point of view. So in our example, there are only 2 guests, but in today's world, in the world of globalization, companies deals with hundreds or thousands of the customers, and that's why it's fairly complex to understand each and every customer and their pattern of consumption. Now, the third point is the average intake capacity or simply the demand of the customer. So we know in our example that there are only two, and that's why we can easily predict or easily forecast their average consumption capacity. But since in retail industry or since in manufacturing industry there are hundreds or thousands of customers, then predicting demand or understanding exact requirement or exact demand of each customer in the market is quite difficult. Now, involvement in planning process. So in our example, it's a family who is involved to plan for the groceries. But in case of industrial scenario, internal departments like product managers, sales and marketing team, and even external customers are involved for the demand planning process. Now, how much products we considered? That is our fifth point. So in our example, we considered only 5 products, but usually in manufacturing or retail business, there are thousands of varieties of a unique product. So it is fairly complex to understand demand pattern for each and every product. Now, what is nature of product in our example? It is a standard product, which is quite, uh, it is a standard product and it has less variety. But in case of industrial scenario, there are non-standard products and there are thousands of unique products also. So having demand forecast for such unique products and such a huge quantity is quite complex. Now, what are the influencing factors in our example? So in our example, there is almost no influencing factors. We know that there are 2 guests who will come and who will visit our home for entire month. But in case of industrial scenario, we have to consider multiple factors which are influencing demand, like promotional impact, seasonal impact, competitors' actions, which are fairly difficult to understand from the market. Now let's understand how is the demand planning process is. So there are basically 6 major steps which we have captured here. So first is to capture the data, which is basically historical demand, which comes from orders, shipments or sales, and this data is usually available in the ERP systems. Now we also have to understand historical pricing and promotional activities and even competitors activities, historical seasonal changes in this step. So next step is forecasting. So in this case, usually there are forecasting softwares which are used by multiple companies. There are hundreds of forecasting softwares which are available in the market, and even our ERP systems are more compatible to do the forecasting process. So sometime forecasting can be also done on spreadsheets or Microsoft Excel. In the next step, the statistical forecast is created. So what is statistical forecast? So there are hundreds of forecasting methods depending on product nature, depending on which forecast method gives better accuracy. Demand planners use certain statistical forecasting methods and they come up with some base data for the future period with the statistical forecasts. Now in the fourth process, it is overriding of the forecast. So demand planner at their level usually do some overriding of the forecast, considering the business plan, considering their own inputs, considering their own experience about the market. Then fifth process is consensus forecast, where demand planner collaborates with multiple team members like sales, marketing, even finance, operations, product managers, and with consensus of all these cross-functional team members, some adjustment is further done in the previous file. Then finally, the last step is approved forecast. Once consensus forecast is done, the final forecast number is approved by executive or by management team, and this forecast number is then used in the planning process further. And this forecast number is also uploaded in the ERP system so that MRP, MPS, and all other systems run effectively for the planning purpose. So this was all about the demand planning process. Now let's understand benefits of demand planning. So we have already seen an example which easily talks about why demand planning is required, where we considered shop 1 and shop 2, and we seen that shop 2 has given better results, better responsiveness, and better availability of product. So multiple benefits of demand planning include, the first one is it increases coordination and information flow within the company and outside the company. So as we have already seen that demand planners have to also collaborate with cross-functional team members within the company like sales team, marketing team, product managers, and demand planners also have to work with the external customers because most of the companies have their collaboration directly with the customer, where customer gives the forecast inputs from their side, and that is considered for the planning purpose. The next benefit of demand planning is it proactively understands the bottlenecks in supply planning organization. So as we have simply we have seen that demand planning is done for next 12 to 18 months, and based on that number one can understand if we can have any bottlenecks in supplying that number in the future, so that we come to know in advance. That is the best benefit of demand planning. The third benefit of demand planning is the leadership is involved in key decision making. Now, once leadership is involved, leadership actually tries to align the business plan, business strategies, and all the direction with the demand plans. And leadership is also involved in approving the demand plan so that the leadership involvement creates more effective process of demand planning. Now, the fourth benefit of demand planning is it evaluates new opportunities for changing market. Now, let's assume that a demand planner is doing demand planning and he is understanding that the demand for particular product is going down day by day. And once it is analyzed why the demand is going down day by day, then one can understand that there may be alternate product or there may be change in customers preference or usage pattern, and that gives an opportunity to understand why or what is changing in the market. Now, the fifth benefit of demand planning is it reduces lead time for customer and it increases responsiveness. Now, we have already seen that demand planning is done to keep certain inventory in a stock so that customer orders can be fulfilled at right time. So it simply reduces the lead time of customer and it makes customer more satisfied by increasing the responsiveness. The next benefit of demand planning is it maintains more accurate level of inventory. So as we are planning for future and we are keeping certain inventories, so it is based on some statistical numbers. It is also based on some judgment of the experts or different cross-functional team members. So it helps to keep more accurate inventory in the facility. And finally, it enhances capacity utilization of supply planning organization. So as we have already seen that we are planning or we are making forecast for next 12 to 18 months. Similarly, supply planning team is also getting ready for the future by considering the demand plan. So the supply planning team can utilize their capacity well by utilizing multiple options like increasing number of shifts, increasing or decreasing labors, increasing or decreasing machines and other capacities required to fulfill the supply.